Today is the June 28th call, and then the rough agenda that we cover on these calls kind of flows where we take time to welcome anybody who may be joining for the first time and wants to say hello. We cover some metrics and look at how the program is doing overall as far as data and growth. We solicit any input that you'd like to see discussed on these calls for the community discussion, as well as any issues that the community would like to flag back. Then we save time to discuss that as we go through. So with that, a very warm, friendly hello. My name is Kevin. This is your team of, governance, as we governance on this call. So Deep, Galen, or for myself, will cover any questions you may have as we go down. If you're joining and you're dialing in and you want to make it easier for us to communicate with you, we put this at the start of all the presentations. Sometimes we'll get a message from someone that's like, hey, iPhone or Dragon Ball Z fan. And it makes it a little bit challenging. So if you want to make it a little bit easier for us to kind of link your name to your org to make it a little bit more helpful for you, a really easy way to do that is to right click on your icon profile and then change it to say like, hey, Kevin, Filecoin Foundation, or something along the likes. And then that way it's a lot easier for us to go back and get you any support you may need. Completely optional, but we're going to post the link here. Gosh, Galen, you're so fast. As always, this will be able to log that participation for SLA. We appreciate you doing this, and we'll have some updates about kind of sharing this data on the next governance call. It's been kind of cool to collect this over the past few weeks so we can see which areas are dialing into which calls, which notaries are coming to the calls, and kind of share these metrics back. The way we do that is just really quick, load that Airtable, sign in, and that way we can mark you down for that SLA. Thank you for coming, by the way. All right, top line, let's take a very quick look at the metrics because we have a full house of some discussion topics this week. So we show this slide every 2 weeks, and I've highlighted the areas that we're really starting to look at in more detail. What you might notice right off the bat is we've updated this page, so you'll see a few new categories. But the 4 that we're going to be looking at continually is the time that's average to data cap, the average LDN that comes through, the time from first response, and then the amount of space and storage that we're providing on the network. So really no change from the average time to data cap, which is nice because now we're all getting ready to go. Ledgers have been verified, LDN has been rolled out, and we're just troubleshooting the final blockers that we'll address on this call. So it'll be neat to see how fast we can start to respond to these as a community and really start to see with more notaries in the program how this number gets driven down so applicants don't have such a long wait as they go through it. And the same thing with the average time to data cap. There's going to be a lot of factors that influence this number, like if an applicant is awaiting any information to provide back. So we'll kind of look at this and see if there's different ways that we could help streamline this. We've talked about the filter bot as well as some other ideas on ways to bubble this up and make that application process a little bit more easy for the applicants to go through. And I believe Deep will talk to some of the updates that we have with that later in the call. So with this, we're still pretty much right on line, network growth, time, and we'll continue to track as we go forward. This comes from the Starboard page, and what we're looking at on this is the daily active deals. So those of you that are on the call, you're no stranger to this slide. Essentially, the fields in yellow are the data that the Filecoin Plus program is being in, and the blue is the regular data. So overwhelming growth that we see from the Fil Plus program. So thank you for your participation. Thank you for the quality data, and thank you for contributing to make sure that this network grows in a very stable trend line as we see here over the past 30 days. And the same process holds for the daily deal count, just right in line, just very solid, just ticking up as we go through. So we appreciate all that as we go. I'm going to turn it over to Galen and a recap of the sprint cycles that we have.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. So showing this again, keeping us accountable, we're trying out some of these governance sprints. LDN V3 is rolling. We have some additional tools and trainings that we still want to come up with, but right now we're sort of kind of mostly in the testing and making sure that it's functioning correctly. The subsequent allocation bots appear to be working as intended so far. There are some other unrelated known issues that we may touch on that people have had using the app, but those are not part of the V3 implementation. So that's where we are with that. Getting closer to that 200 PIBs of sealed data cap. We've crossed over the 100, and then we're coming up with a new way to count the active LDNs and have a reliable source of truth for that. with the switch to V3, there's some like different ways that we need to capture that metric. We've already talked about the speed numbers and then a couple engagement docs. Oh, sorry, can we go back one? Thanks. Some more documentations. The governance working group proposals that is posted. We've had some good conversation back and forth on that for the e-fill. We have some new additional proof of concept proposals from some different community members that I think would also fall into this governance category. And then we are continuing to work on our trust and safety team and sort of the support for our risk analysis groups. So not any specific things to show on this week, but we are making progress on all of them. And as we come up with updates, we'll have them. And then like we planned in that July 26th governance call, we should have sort of a misted or finalized update on this sprint. So thanks everybody for trying out this new structure.
Thanks, Galen. Galen, one of the questions came through was the DWD acronym. Looks like Alexandria answered it, but
yes,
those watching, can you address that?
Yep. So one of the things we care about is days without data cap. Once a client has been approved, as long as they're continuing to operate in good faith, they should not run out of data cap. And so that is where that days without data cap number comes from. And that has to do with really how well is the subsequent allocation bot functioning? Is the timing on that correct? Are the allocation sort of tranches working the way that we intended? If we start to see more and more clients running out of data cap and needing like a bridge allocation or something like that, then it would be indicative that we might have some kind of issue breaking down in the system. So we believe that if a client has been approved and is operating in good faith, they should not run out of data cap unless they intend to. For example, they've used all that they planned for whatever project they were going to do. So good question.
Great question. Thank you for that. Okay, so high level, this is the tactics that we're going to take a look at on this call. So a couple open issues. We're going to be talking about Notary Investigations, quick update on the Phil Plus videos that are going online, talking briefly for feedback on the second governance time. We're going to demonstrate and cover the new Beacon project proposal that was submitted, give some updates on the BDE LDN process, the new template design with issue 568, and then we have the enterprise proposal from Megan Holon, but she's in Australia, so we might speak on her behalf on this call, and then she'll add additional details with her project in 2000 in a second. So very full agenda. If there was other items that you wish to discuss that weren't on this list, as a reminder, we post in the Notary Governance repo every week. So you can say, hey, I'd like to add an item to that agenda, and we'll be sure to bake that into this. So let's get started.
I can take this one. So there have been some questions brought up about some different notaries for round 3. We've been capturing those questions to the best of our ability, putting those questions in the notary applications themselves for public transparency. We are continuing some ongoing diligence. We don't yet have finalized results on all of those different questions that are brought up, but once we resolve them, we'll be updating publicly in GitHub. We'll also kind of announce those on governance calls and in Slack. So if you were curious about like what is happening with the status of those, we're having some more direct meetings and investigations to get additional context and evidence. So that's where we are.
We'll cover this one. Big thank you to those of you that either came in person or watched the Phil Plus Day. As a quick subtle plug, they're on YouTube. We shared the initial link right now just to kind of keep you updated. We are working with a translation service, and what the translation service is going to do is add Mandarin subtitles to the very bottom. So if you might be watching this and English isn't your primary language, we're going to try to make this as easy as possible for you to access and view. And the way that we did Phil Plus Day was tried to make it as much of a a resource that we could come back to with information to introduce you to the program, to answer common questions. So it should be a nice time capsule of where we were. So again, the link is live on YouTube. We'll post this again. And I think once the translations are added, I'll blast it even more heavily in the channels for that. All right. This next one we talked about on the last call, and we're kind of soliciting feedback. So as you know, this governance call runs twice a day. When we started this Fil Plus program and the community participation, this used to be a single call during the day, but there was no way that we could get the time zone right, or there wasn't somebody that was either dialing it very late at night or in the morning that wasn't convenient. With the time change, it's made it a little bit more complicated. So there was an issue that was proposed. It's been open for about 3 weeks. This is the second time we've talked to it. And the question was, can we adjust the second time of the call? So that second time call currently takes place at 4 p.m. Pacific, 2300 UTC, and 7 a.m. Beijing. If you look at the participants that are dialing into this second call, you'll see that the majority are coming from the Greater China region, which is hitting at that 6 a.m. time slot. And then we have the folks in North America, 7 a.m., the dialing in. So the real question is, do we shift this time to 1800 to make it easier for those that are in the Beijing time zone to either attend both calls if they wanted to hear additional information, or the folks that can't make this late night call? So we've asked for feedback in the last calls. I think that this is going to be the final round. And the proposal that we're soliciting feedback on is to pilot test this in August. So not to drastically change the schedule without too much notice. We'll give it 2 cycles. And then in August, shift the time zones back 2 hours. This would only apply to the second call. And those of you that are dialing in from Beijing, it would be at 0900. That way you're not having to dial in super early in the morning. And ideally, those of us that are calling in from North America, it's still within that line. So if you have any thoughts or feedback, I see some like emojis in chat. It's kind of perfect. What also really helps is if you come to that issue 538 and you say, yes, I like that proposal, or no, Kevin, that's the silliest thing I've ever heard. And I've heard a lot of things. It makes it really nice. What we're trying to do is not make these decisions in a bubble and a vacuum to include. We'll be soliciting that final second round of feedback on this afternoon's call. But again, if you have thoughts on this, please write back in that GitHub. We're trying to treat GitHub as that source of truth and that record so we can get an accurate count of the times working. So again, Galen's posted a link. Really appreciate your feedback. And what we're looking to do is in the month of August, pilot test, shifting that second governance call 2 hours to make it easier for those of you in the Greater China region to attend that other call so it's not so late. Yeah.
Awesome. Yes. Posted the link. Hopefully we'll see some additional conversation there. There's another, like I mentioned, there's another proof of concept proposal here, Project Beacon. Let me get the link to that one as well so people can read it. Or actually maybe Deep can pull up that link while I speak to it. Okay, so this is another LDN application coming in from a group. I would encourage everyone to go check it out. It has some interesting context and info. It has some notary support already. It's very similarly following what the SEAL project is trying to do with Antarctic. Effectively 11 PIBs of unique. They've identified some different storage providers. Those storage providers are, to my understanding, all in China. I could be wrong about that. That's a clarifying question that we want to put in the proposal itself, just to make sure that I'm not making a false assumption. And like we said, there's already some notary support for it. So wanted to yes, okay, that's what I thought, that it is all in China. Wanted to bring this up to the community and hear what people have to say about this issue as a proof of concept to see where does the notary governance stand on supporting another sort of out of band large data set test. So really, I would love to just open the floor and see what people on this call have to say about this particular project.
I added some thoughts yesterday, specifically that all the notaries that had initially shown support were also from the same region, or not from that many regions. And so I suggested to Eric, as well as the applying client and some of the other notaries that were involved. I think there's already 4 of them on the thread too. So there's Eric from Bytebase, but there's also Plusgate, Finbushi, and Firefly that are engaged. And so I just suggested that it's probably good to have notaries from multiple regions. The precedence that was set with Project Antarctic was that we had coverage from at least 3 regions. And so there were notaries from the China region, North America, and Europe on that one, as far as actually Oceania as well. And so there were actually 4 regions there. But I think at least getting notary approval outside of region helps sort of validate that, okay, like there are people that aren't in your region that aren't going to directly benefit from this or feel like there's any disproportionate relationship, and are still able to vet this to some extent. And so generally that seems to be received well, and I think they're interested in being able to chase that down. And so, yeah, I think overall, this is, pushing the boundary a little bit once again, where it's, okay, this is encrypted data, similar to Antarctic. In this case, though, it's not scientific data. It's something that's actually has to be compliant with some government's policy. And that comes with another tier of complications. So it's a good learning experience. My take is that we should learn from this and continue to expand what we think we can support through the Filecoin Plus program, and how we can continue to be a good engine to identify useful usage of the network, or productive usage of the network.
Great, thanks, Deep. The link is in chat. I'll post it one more time. Go read up on this issue. We're gonna, talk about it a few more times. We'll see. Try and get some additional notary support and weigh in on that one, and go from there.
Hey, thanks, Galen, Deep, and Kevin for organizing this, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to. Is it my turn? Or project?
Yeah, I think one. Yeah, go forward one. There we go.
Okay, my bad. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. There's been a lot of questions regarding big data exchange. So, thank you for giving me the chance to clarify to address some of the issues. So, big data exchange is a marketplace to match storage providers with clients of Filecoin deals. A lot of people ask us, why are we applying for LDM when we are a platform to match both parties? The number one reason is that we want to understand the process so we can help onboard non-crypto native clients, other data communities into our ecosystem. And the second reason is that we launched 3 weeks ago. We have seen demand from both sides. We have clients listing auction. We have SP bidding on all these auctions. We want to maintain this momentum, and currently we do see that there's more need on the SP side, and we want to increase the supply on our platform to drive the momentum. Yeah. So the most important thing I want to clarify is that the goal of us applying this LDN is not to profit from data cap. Any proceeds from any self-hosted auction that we do will be donated to data preservation organization or used to incentivize activities that aim to onboard more useful data storage on Filecoin. One example I'd like to give is that we want to bring institutions that are currently not in Filecoin in, and to bring them in, we will need to either help them with the Filecoin onboarding process, or we need to do it ourselves first in the short term and use their data. So that's something we want to do. That's why we're applying. And yeah, I want to emphasize again, any proceeds will be donated to causes to fund Filecoin's mission. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, CB, for the clarification. I know there were a ton of questions from several notaries and community members, so this helped me understand. I also had similar questions, and so I appreciate it. I know you won't be able to be here for the evening call because that's probably going to be very late at night for you, and so for that one, I can do my best to represent this, or Galen can, and that way we'll we'll get the word out for the people that weren't able to make it to this session. I think the only question I have for you is, as part of the educational and sort of experience learning side of things, is this like something that you're going to eventually turn into like an offering for clients, where it's like, okay, like we'll handhold you through the process to make it substantively easier for you to go get data cap? And if yes, is any of this going to be publicly documented that the community can also benefit from as part of you doing this effort anyway?
Yes, I think what I envision is that in the long term, we want to have the offering, and again, not to profit from it. We want to help to onboard, we want to bring new data communities. So I think that's one way we can try doing that, bridging the gap between the know-how. So that's something, like you say, we want to offer. And in terms of documentation, yes, if there is a need to, we'll definitely do it to benefit the whole community. Again, our goal is not to be the gatekeeper, or to, our goal is really just to facilitate the process. If there's anything we can do to help, we want to do that, because what we want to do is really to create a robust marketplace, to fill supply to have supply for SP, and to create, a process where we can incentivize data communities to come on board into our ecosystem. Anyone else has any other question?
TB, if I were you, I'd drop your LDN application link in the chat in case there's any notaries in here.
Okay,
I can go take a look.
Let me do it right now. Thank you. And I also drop my website too.
Awesome. Thanks. We got the link there for issue 391. Deep, I think this next agenda item is you.
So this is, I'm still dealing with a bug on this, and I can't figure out what's going on, but I'll walk you through the thinking. So this is a proposal 565. The goal of this is extremely simple. We currently have the LDN application form as a raw markdown. Let me send a link to this. And what that does is it creates a significant opportunity for UX-based mistakes, where users who are not correctly interpreting what is expected of them end up like failing on basic like validation. So to give you a concrete example, if you accidentally hit like a back tick, or you remove one of them while filling out the application because you're doing a bunch of double clicking and typing, the formatting of the entire form breaks and the validation breaks. Or another, if you look at input fields and types of data that notaries are specifically looking to get. So for example, is this application for public or for private data? Those are things that could have been dropdowns or checkboxes, or things that like deterministically resulted in the applying client, whether that's the data owner themselves or somebody acting on behalf of the data owner, to inform the community and inform the notaries correctly. And so GitHub has this feature in preview today where they support YAML-based issue templates. And so we've experimented with this. If we actually look at the Lotus repo, the bug report there is a YAML style template. And that's really cool. It has a bunch of checkboxes and you fill out information. And so I was like, well, why aren't we using this on our end? And so I'm in the process of sort of building a copy of our existing LDN application template, plus added like 1 or 2 clarification questions and converting that into a YAML. So it looks more like a form when you go to fill it out. I think that this could help with improved user experience. Like, I don't think it looks prettier necessarily, but I do think you're more likely to put in the right things and see the right questions. It gives us better validation, so we can have inbuilt validation in GitHub that says, hey, if this question has not been filled out, you cannot proceed with the application, which is really helpful because it reduces one loop for the client to wait for the bot to spot something and then try and interpret what the bot's trying to tell them. And then the third, and I think the most interesting but unexplored thing is we're already doing a bunch of like GitHub scraping for information to populate dashboards and things like that. This would make that more deterministic, but then also give us opportunity to collect different types of data. Because when you create data structures or you create models that result in more specific information input, you can use that in more interesting ways as well. I've been a little bit behind with a bunch of stuff in the last week or so, so I'm catching up to a ton of things. So this is my like really fast, like quick and dirty version of it. This is absolutely not ready to be merged in, but I wanted to flag it and start to get your early sort of thinking on whether or not, one, this makes sense. Two, if you think anything else could be done to improve it. And then three, if you have any questions on what I have so far. It's still a work in progress. It looks like there's a bug that's resulting in me not being able to display like the first 5 questions or something. So I'm going to go and try and figure that out at some point at the end of next week. Sorry, at the end of this week, and share it with you all in Slack as I continue to make progress.
Yeah, I have one question. Why do we want to keep using GitHub for this kind of applications or everything related to farm things? Because I really don't see how GitHub serves us well for our needs.
I think there's actually only one reason, and I completely agree that we're basically shoehorning effectively a solution that isn't natural. It's not like a natural fit for the environment they're in. The main reason is I think that it provides a public, accessible, auditable workspace where we can both continue to share everything that's happening with anybody in the community that wants to see it to the best of our ability, but then also facilitates an environment where changes to the governance process or even the application process are easy for anybody to do, right? So very concretely, if somebody wants to go and update the documentation, or if somebody wants to go and change the application template, it's that you just open up a PR. It's not like an extended process where we then need to do it in 2 places. I agree that it's not the best, but I think it's been good enough, or there's been enough so far to continue using it for the time being. I'm totally down to explore other options. I don't know if anybody in this community feels super strongly about staying with GitHub. Actually, Kira, Galen, if you have thoughts, would love to hear them. But for the time being, Alex, like this is a very cheap change. As I said, I've been behind on a bunch of stuff. I think I did this in like 10 minutes as a proposal just to like put it out and see what it would look like. And I think implementing it would also be pretty cheap. And so it could be like in lieu or in the interim until we figure out something better. Open-minded.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily easier, because if you think about it, every tool that scans for issues right now, we'll have to change the implementation and whatnot. So I think if we will change how these things are sent or dealt with, I think we gotta choose the right tool for this kind of job, and because it's not so easy to change every implementation, every dashboard, every data pipeline to use this new template. So if we keep making changes, people are gonna have a hard time like building upon our stuff. So I think it's better if we just pause, search for the best tool or best whatever. And regarding the having transparency and having an audit trail or anything like that, we can use any platform and plug it in to dump data onto the or GitHub repos and whatnot. So I think that will be a lot easier to use the right tool, and then just move the data we want to keep it for transparency in GitHub or whatever. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, so I think the only thing that I would add to that, Alex, is that the scraping stuff that we've been building for the different dashboards, a lot of that is just regular expression and like text search based. So I'm actually not changing any of the text. So it would just be like looking at the text and then the next field. I am curious how, if it has like, I think so far the only thing I've had to do is I had to remove colons at the end of questions, which I think should be a relatively minor fix. I had some brief conversations, not with everybody, just with like one of the teams that's working on the dashboards, and it seemed like relatively cheap, but I think it's a fair flag. I can definitely do some more investigation. I know you've been doing some thinking on this, and so I owe you some responses on other stuff. Maybe we can chat about this as well and see if we can come back to the community with something. But it seemed to me like not that expensive. Maybe I'm underestimating it. And if I am, I'm open-minded to like not push this one through and instead focus on other stuff. I know, Galen, you added something to the chat. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's effectively what you said, which is that the changes in a form like this are not very drastic, and some minor kind of quality of life changes to the form, and the implementations of those will take less than a number of days compared to switching to an entire new platform, which is something that we are investigating, but making that switch is more like a multi-month project. And so I don't know that it is worth blocking on quality of life improvements until we have a new platform. I think that we can continue making these iterative uplifts. And I do think that that helps us learn more about what we want in a platform long term. Like knowing that we need robust forms helps inform like what kind of platform we pick next.
Yeah, I think one issue is that we are by changing the forms in GitHub, we are making it easier for us to implement it, but harder for third parties to like implement or change things, because we are using it, we are changing because it's easier for us this way. It's easier to change, it's easier to make it like start using right away, but it makes it really hard to the other stakeholders who may be using the current implementation. So I think that's the main issue, because it makes easier for us but harder for everyone else. So that's my take. But I'll give it a go reading the issue Deep posted and comment everything there. So
yeah, I think if you can call out like specific things that you think will be expensive to adjust, that'd be very helpful. I don't know if I have a super confident stance to disagree or agree with you. This is more like I wanted to see what the implications of this might be and how it could help with the client onboarding experience. I think the one thing that I think would definitely break is, we've been experimenting with different skins to be built on top of the LDN application form. So for example, if you go to plus.fil.org/LDN-application, there's like this new UI that you can fill out, and instead of sort of using the GitHub issue generation thing, you can go through that. We'll launch that more formally in the coming weeks. But other people have been experimenting with that as well, and that's really cool because you can basically just build a layer on top instead of having to modify like the underlying GitHub as a database of applications problem. However, I just need to figure out like what the implications of changing to YAML-based templates will be for that party as well. So I think there's two sets of stakeholders here, Alex. It's the people that are building on top of the application, and there's the people that are scraping the application. I have a low confidence guess that at least for the latter, it's extremely cheap, but you should correct that because you're one of those people. And so we'd love to hear from you. Overall, I will say that if you're asking that, if you think about overarching priorities and stuff, at least in my opinion, I would say ease of use for clients and people filling out this form is way higher a priority than ease of use for like the tooling that we need to build around that support. We have super talented people in this ecosystem that have been doing a lot of awesome work on the tracking and the maintenance and the building of layers on top. And I'm very confident in your and other people's ability to continue delivering. Our job here is to build the lowest friction path to a productive Filecoin network. That means making it incredibly easy for two main stakeholders. Number one, clients. Number two, notaries. These are the two people that are most critical today in ensuring that data cap is attributed and allocated to the right people as fast as possible. And we do whatever we can around that. Thank you.
Can I ask you something, Deep?
Yes, sir.
For the dashboard, do I understand correctly that there's a content management system connected to it?
I wish. Yeah. So we have a DB. Yeah.
That's some of my wishes, because when I have written something in an application on Git, I I would like to have that tracked some way
Yes,
somehow, so I know
absolutely.
where I was.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
And so,
yeah, that's
yeah, absolutely. I think 100% this is something we want to do. And that's part of the plan. I know Alex has been thinking about it a bunch as well. Other people have as well. So definitely agree. Why not, just for a little bit of context for you, before I know Alex has a hand, before we chat about that CMS type thing a little further, uh, what we do today is we basically do a bunch of scraping, really, right? So we do a combination of metadata and data available on GitHub directly about issue creation times, commenting times, who's commenting, what's being posted, what's being shared, and dump that into a DB. And then we correlate that because all of the bot issues, for example, right, they link to like an LDN multi-sig address, or they link to a client address, or they link at the very least to message CIDs. Sorry, I should say at the very least a client address, and mostly always message CIDs. And then we correlate that with message scraping that we're doing on chain. And so we're able to correlate the two things and generate some really awesome insights and views into what are the notaries that are signing which applications at what time, what is the individual time to data cap for each of those notaries, what are the high risk issues, or what are issues that are receiving disproportionate amount of traction and things like that. But all of that is constructed in a database today that is not like a natural sort of CRM or anything of that sort. Yeah. I shouldn't say CMS. Actually, CRM, I think, is a better term for what we could use here. But this is
I
now
think
turning into like a different conversation, which is also an important one to have. So I'm going to suggest that we actually kick off a discussion on this, because I think it's a really cool topic and I think it's a really important one. But before I wrap up, why not, if you have any follow-ups, and Alex, you have a hand, and then let's move to the next topic.
just a quick tip that
no
if you
follow-ups.
wanna
That's okay.
if you want to know more about some work I'm doing on that end to implement something like CRM and CMS like together, I'm building a system to handle those things using Atlassian, Confluence, Jira, Jira Service Management, and that's all interconnected. So we have a better way of knowing where to get things and have all the data like centralized for everyone's use. So if you take a look at Slack, we have some discussions around that going on. So yeah.
Cool.
Can you post a link to that in the Notary channel so I can track it a bit? I'm driving at the moment, so I can't take notes.
What channel are you talking about?
Put it in
The
Phil
Notary
Plus.
channel?
Why not?
Yeah,
I'll send
Phil
you,
Plus.
yeah, I think the main Phil Plus one is the
That
best
lives
one,
in Phil
yeah.
Plus.
Yeah, it's better.
Okay.
I'll send you a link, why not, or Alex, you can DM why not a link to the thread once you have it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Cool. Separately, it might be good as part of that conversation to also talk about like what are the tools that we're comfortable like taking a bet on as like an open working community versus ones that we may not be as down for, depending on like either funding or future path or future direction, and then the relative trade-offs to just something as simple as GitHub. And so, yeah, all good stuff though. Thank you.
Great discussion. All right, we have one more. I think I'll step in and speak. I don't see Meg on the line. So for those of you that don't know, Meg is spearheading a project called the Enterprise Proposal. She's given us updates on the last call. This is just another one that comes along. And the high level for the Enterprise Proposal is right now they are seeking feedback on this project. So one of the reasons we shared this deck is that you could read this along and get all the details. Again, Meg will speak much more eloquently to this. But at a very high level, what this proposal is looking to do is two parts right now, the feedback stage. It's one, get the feedback from you on as far as like a pulse check. And what she's looking for is notaries that want to participate in giving their input on this plan. The second is, as we've talked about on this call, one of the goals that we're looking at for 2022 is to make life easier. And specifically, as Deep said, the people's lives that we're trying to improve are the applicants in the process and the notaries that are filling that out. So specifically what she's looking for is 8 to 10 notaries that would want to dedicate their time to participating in this. I think what she's looking for is very active participants in this that want to look at this as like a side project. And then how do you offer that enterprise MVP proposal to kind of take this cradle to grave? So again, we've talked about this at Filecoin Plus Day. We've had this come up on the last sync, but I think what she's looking for right now is a dedicated group of notaries. So if you were keen in participating in this, please reach out to Meg at Holon in Slack. She'll be on the second governance call, so we'll have that video live if you'd like to watch specifically what she calls out. But with that proposal that the 8 to 10 notaries will be participating in, it's taking a look at the clients and storage providers in this pilot. So essentially trying out something new, seeing what works, and then collecting feedback and just kind of that iterative sprint process. So that lead storage provider will then be that comparable operations and looking at like, hey, does this infrastructure work? Is this a sustainable model that we're putting together for others in the community? So if you like testing new things, if you like giving feedback, this would be the perfect group for you. Again, reach out to Meg at Holon via Slack or the issue proposals. One of the things that she wanted to flag was the risks and mitigation. So one of the big things is any system that we talked about rolling out has to be applicable across the board. As Deep showed with the LDN application change, just that one subtle change on the application, and we had about a 15-minute conversation looking at it. So Meg is very mindful that any changes that we make have to be good for the goose as well as the gander. So taking a look at that risk, it needs to be like open, transparent. And again, that's why she's looking for 8 to 10 notaries to join and give that really concrete feedback that what's being developed is actually applicable for the needs. So with that, I'm going to pause. I'll turn back over to Galen and Deep if you have any other additions that we want to talk about. We can kind of open it up to the community.
Yes, thanks. I was going to touch on the enterprise proposal because there have been a couple comments back and forth on it. And I'll also jump in and comment on the issue itself. But the comments have been around whether or not a FIP is necessary for this. I think that we could go a couple of different ways. Strictly speaking, this can fit within FIP 3 and not require a new entire FIP in order for us to run a proof of concept like this. We could draft an informational FIP, but this is not, as it is being presented, this would not require any technical changes to the Filecoin project, as far as I know, based on what is being pitched here, which has to do with still the type of subsidy that happens on the network. So just clarifying that an informational FIP could be drafted, but is not required based on the wording of FIP 3 and the wording of this proposal so far. Deep.
Can I come out with an opinion here and say that we should not be doing a FIP for this? Like, it doesn't actually make sense to me. Maybe I'm missing something about the value of an informational FIP here, but we've made so many changes to this program since FIP 3. Like, for example, even the LDN thing, let alone like V1, V2, V3, have not been FIP because they're just not necessary. It is not a good use of time and effort. That team is also doing a bunch of stuff, and there's a lot of like things happening that require changes at the protocol level. These things don't. We're running scoped experiments. We're building on past experiments, and it doesn't. I don't know. Please correct me. I think maybe I might be missing something on like the value prop of the informational FIP.
I think it will be easier for newcomers to understand how everything really is, because if I don't know if necessarily a FIP or something else, but something that we can go look how the system operates right now and how it works right now, instead of just having to chase down the information. I think that's one of the main goals of having a FIP for something, is to have like a centralized way of knowing what is happening, how it's happening, and how everything works together. So
okay, that makes sense.
That's one point for having a FIP, but I have no fixed opinion for now.
That makes sense. I disagree with that being in favor of a FIP, because if you look at the base of people that we're trying to attract with this, right? The point of it is to build an entry point to Fil Plus, which is as simple and as consistent as possible, which then means we will probably need to have some accompanying documentation, at least like some kind of nice landing page. At bare minimum, those two things will need to happen. So then expecting that like somebody's going to go read a FIP to understand how the process works or how it got to where it got to is, I think, like not going to happen. I might be,
But a lot of people do this. I did it myself. So
I think you're relatively unique. And also, if that were true, then we would have heard before that people wanted to see informational FIPS for like LDN changes, and never has anybody asked me about that. And
maybe because
yeah.
they like run away instead of sticking to the program and
that's okay.
becoming a member. But I don't know. That's only it.
I think the big difference with this is that this proposal is specifically for storage providers to lead BD and bring clients. So the storage provider is already very aware of like where this information is in the state, and they are going to direct their client to the information they want them to see. I don't think that it is reasonable to expect a client who is trying to like, make a decision on Filecoin to go read through various FIPS. The storage provider will be like, go to this doc, watch this YouTube video. Like the storage providers are going to curate that experience. The client, who is an enterprise, like may do their own investigation, but landing on a GitHub issue in the Notary governance repo, I think is just as clear and likely as landing on a GitHub issue in the FIPS repo for a client who is just coming to the project and being brought to the project by an already versed storage provider. So that's my take. I think the main reason to not write a FIP is, as Deep says, the amount that is going to slow the project, this like proof of concept down, and the amount of traction that team is already trying to get for different network upgrades, that having another FIP pulls focus on things that are already in flight. And thirdly, the question of like, does that set a precedent that then any new proof of concept to the Filecoin project like would need to have an informational FIP? So I also have yet to see the best explanation for like when an informational FIP is necessary. And so since that, it makes a lot of sense to me that a FIP is required when there is a technical protocol change. And I think that primarily using that platform for those types of FIPs makes a lot more sense to me. And I think I understand that's where the broader governance team lands as well. But Caitlin and the teams writing the different FIPs.
That has two points, right? Because in one way, we are making change move faster, but in the other way, we cannot change it. We are making it harder to understand the system and understand where everything is. I understand that it makes things move faster, but it makes it harder to understand the system as well. So we are having issues with right now. We're having issues with fraud detection and fraud reports. We are having some issues like people don't really know where to get information, where to have guides of how to become a client, how to make a request, how to everything. I spend a lot of time on the Slack channel across a lot of Slack channels, and what I see, I really don't see a lot of people that know really well how things are, how things work, and how to get those things. While you say that storage providers or clients know how to do this stuff and don't actually look for in GitHub or FIPS, I disagree. I see a lot of people that don't really know how things work and have a hard time finding the right approach to make requests or to make changes or to understand what changes are in effect or what are our limitations, how the program works, who runs it. I see a lot of issues like that in Slack or GitHub or Reddit or Twitter and everything else. So I really don't see how relying on storage providers or clients or any other stakeholders besides the governance team will make it easier to run this. I think we gotta make the structure ourselves and then when we have a good structure and a good change management, then other stakeholders can help us reach broader people and channels and whatnot. So yeah.
So it
But,
sounds like a
from-
documentation.
oh,
Sorry, go on,
sorry.
Leonard. Go for it.
Yeah, but the most of the information is just on GitHub on the page where it states what you need to do for an LDN, what the rules are for the LDN, and yes, the rules are not always complete, and there are some questions still alive, but those can be added on the same GitHub page. So I don't understand why you should make another GitHub page or another FIP or another source of information that makes it more difficult. Yeah, I would just rather suggest to put this on the GitHub page of the Notary channel or the LDN GitHub page, and put it on the main page and make that documentation more complete. That would be more helpful. And when you do an onboarding of an application on GitHub, you can always direct the people to that link and say, okay, please read here before you apply. Makes it more easy and more convenient.
Yeah, I think Alex, all the stuff you're pointing out is like a content and discoverability thing, right? Which is like we need to have more consistent and more complete content, which is also I think what Wynan is saying. So basically, right now we used to have like a blog / landing page on the foundation side. We have like a single like doc in the Lotus docs. We have 3 different GitHub repos. And no like single place to go. And then we have a website that has some basic info and then shoots you off to these different places. So I completely agree that like, we definitely need to take a stab at like, consolidating the content and explain this stuff somewhere that we can send people with confidence and expect that they'll get to know what they need to know to be able to execute based on that. That's a documentation problem. Having a FIP just creates like a new thing. Yeah, Wynan, what's up?
No, sorry, I have to run. I see an Amber Alert here, so
okay.
I wanted to continue this, but I will be another time. Bye-bye.
Okay, be safe. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I think like ultimately all of the things that you're saying make sense. I just think that having an informational FIP is not going to solve any of that. We're just going to end up in the same place. I think the right thing to do is actually to consolidate the content and have like either 1 or at most 2 places that anybody that needs to be in the system needs to go to understand how they need to like what their path is and what is the complete set of things they need to understand to like achieve success in their path.
One small comment. I point those things because I understand that you have to move fast and whatnot, and I don't know if it's this stuff is suitable for FIP or whatnot, but my comments are more general in the sense that we have to be careful not to just make every change outside of FIP just to make it run faster, because we are basically I may be wrong, but my from seeing a lot of changes happen outside of FIP makes me wonder if we are not just gaming the system instead of going for the right path to make like solid changes. We are just doing the stuff outside of the right approach or whatnot to make things move faster, but we're actually like not doing the right way. I'm not saying that this is the case, but we got to be mindful and careful about not running into that.
Sure. I think that there might be a mismatch in like what the expectation is for like a FIP. Alex, like I think it's possible that my interpretation, because I did set some precedence for this and should take blame for it if it's incorrect, that my interpretation of when to use a FIP is incorrect, like not right. I'm relatively confident that my interpretation of when to use a FIP is right. And based on that, I would happily stake my reputation that it's totally fine to proceed the way that we have outside of the FIP system. Happy to chat about that further. It might be worth like having a conversation with Caitlin in the next governance call, even Gillen, to chat about it. Maybe the way the FIP process has evolved in the last several months also means we need to adjust. And I think that that's okay. Either way, as far as I know, unless there's a specific protocol level change that's happening or a spec level change that's happening, you're not required to go down the FIP path. And then additionally, all of the stuff that we're doing today is actually just the same network mechanism, right? Like ultimately, these are just different approaches to the same network mechanism. And so at a protocol or spec, or even at like a baseline, like what is the motivation for this? Why did we do it? Like the things that you would expect in an initial informational FIP, those things have been pretty much the same for the last like 18 months. And so, yeah, happy to chat about this one further. It might be worth bringing in somebody from that team too, and make sure that any baseline assumptions, at least I'm making, that might be extending to other people in this community, are correct.
Yep.
Cool.
Good discussion. We're at the 1 hour mark. So I think what we can do is we can take that offline. I had just one update. I wanted to say a big thank you to those of you that flagged the issue with the application signs, and a big thank you to Fabricio, Deep, and Galen for getting that solved. So if you were still having issues with your signing of applications or anything with the field registry, please let us know. And a big thank you to those of you that posted in the public channel. It made it a lot easier to thread the issues versus having them all come through on DMs. So as a quick bow on that, that should be tied up. Please let us know if you see anything else. We had 2 applicants that submitted their videos. These are people that would like you to review their process, but just want to share this link one more time to you late joiners. You might have missed in the beginning if you wanted to mark down for SLA participation. And those of you that submitted your application videos, I'm going to post this into the application review and the notary channel so that they can see you. I know that we had a late entry. I commented on the GitHub issue. I invite you to come back in the next 2 weeks since you missed this week's cutoff, but we'll happily give you time. So my trade, I'll share this. So if any of the notaries have questions, I know the main one outstanding is we were waiting for you to verify your organization. So with that, we're at the 1 minute mark. If you guys have any discussions or any topics that you want to continue to unfold, please, let's take it over to Slack and we can go from there. So otherwise, I wanted to thank you all for dialing in. Looking forward to seeing you on the next call, and cheers.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the second governance call of the day. Today is June 28th. At a very high level, if you're just joining us for these formats, the way we kind of structure these is we kick off with a high-level introduction. If this is your first time on the line, feel free to say hello. We will take a moment just to kind of introduce the team. We briefly look at the metrics just to kind of check in on the network and its growth. Then we request community discussion items via the GitHub repo. And so we'll talk about any of the issues that you'd like to flag, and we save time at the end for anything that might be on your mind as we go through it. So with that, a friendly hello. My name is Kevin. On the line, we also have Galen, Deep, and Rajef. What we are is your governance team trying to make sure that the network runs well for you, and any kind of questions you may have, we kind of all have our little domain specialties to help you out. If you're on the line and you have a question for us, if you haven't introduced yourself before, it makes it really easy if your Zoom handle matches your name. So just as a quick housekeeping, sometimes it might connect for like phone. We don't know how we can kind of address you. So if you change your Zoom handle, it makes it a lot more effective to help if you have any questions or introductions on this call. And thank you again for coming. Those of you notaries on this to participate and make sure that the network is growing in a stable way. Galen, thanks for posting that link. This is the check-in. This populates for the SLA for the elections. Just kind of a quick way to say hello, introduce, and keep track. If you are not a notary and you still want to sign, please do. We'll look at this in the 4th round of elections, like, hey, who was coming to these and participating, and put that on the application. So even if you are not a notary, sign into this roster. Let us know hello, and we'll keep your contact information. All right, so a quick look at metrics, and then we'll move right through the agenda because we have a big full day. We are highlighting 4 metrics that we've been looking at, and that is the average time to data cap, average time to LDN, the response from notaries, and then the size of the network. So these are really stable. There hasn't been a lot of changes. We had a big slowdown the last 2 weeks when we were rolling out LDN v3. But the thing to call out right now is just looking at that we're at no change for the average time to data cap. We are right around that 5-day hovering mark for the first response from notaries. So this is one of the things we're kind of playing around with. We have that filter bot that's running. we're kind of experimenting with some ways to make that ping go out to you in a very low friction way. So we're trying to see what we can do to make this response time for notaries more effective. But I think now that we have all of the regions in the Fil Plus sign in, everyone can see all of the 50 notaries. This should start to drive itself down. So we'll see that. And just to call out the network strength, we're at 3.87. So this is kind of like just ticking up. You might see it like 0.5, 0.3, and that seems to be in our standard deviation for like a normal weeks of growth. And you can see that growth here in this slide right now. Yellow is us on the Fil Plus project. And I think what I call out from the last 30 days is it's just a very stable ramp up. There's no big peaks, there's no big valleys. So we're just seeing just consistent network growth, which is nice. And the same thing with percentage of the total network. It's pretty amazing to see that Fil Plus constitutes 79% of all the daily active deals and 78% of that deal count. So lots of activity. Thank you so much for everything that you guys are doing, and looking forward to more bar graphs as we go through it. With this, I'll turn it over to Galen.
Thank you. Yes, we mentioned that we're trying to organize into these sort of 6-week sprints. And so we talked about this at the last governance call, just giving a quick update. And then at the end of this, in July, we'll give more of a like detailed sort of check-in on like what we hit. But basically, LDN is in flight. V3 is working. People are getting their allocations from that new multi-sig notary. It should be showing up for everyone. There was a issue with the Kiko app yesterday and the day before. The update fix got pushed for that. People weren't seeing any of the requests. Thank you everybody for calling that out and bringing attention to it. There is an ongoing issue that is unrelated to any of these things that has to do with a ledger update where people are getting an unexpected method error, and we're working with the Zondax ledger team to address that. But we still want to do some more tools and training stuff on some of the LDN v3 implementations. Those are still in the works. As far as volume, we're over 100 PIBs so far. So that's good. And with the new switch to V3, we're going to have to figure out how to recalculate and track the number of active LDNs and report that out with veracity. So we're working on that. As we just showed, we are tracking the TTD for large data sets. There's also on here this DWD, which we've talked about a few times, but just to clarify, in case you don't remember or you're new, that's days without data cap. So one of the things that we care about is once a client has been approved on any of the surfaces, but especially on large data sets, if they continue to operate in good faith, we want their days without data cap to be 0. Effectively, we want the subsequent allocation mechanisms to be working for good clients. Then we have some more documentation to post around engagement and README updates. There's a working group governance proposal. That proposal has been kicked off in the Notary governance repo and will also be talked about more in this meeting. And then we are continuing to work on our trust and safety grant extensions and some job description work contracts. So we're doing well. I would say that all of these are still on track, and none of them are at extreme risk for missing by that July 26th.
Okay, so these are the specific agenda items that were pulled from the GitHub repo, as well as big ticket items to kind of share. We had a lot of discussion with these in the morning. So if you are joining for this call and you weren't here in the morning and you were keen, when I post this on YouTube, there might be a lot more discussion that you were keen to like watch. So just as a quick caveat, there might be a lot of open as we go through on this. So let's kick off. Galen, do you want to take the investigation?
Yes, there have been a few questions raised in a couple different notary applications, asking for some more diligence and clarification. I just wanted to call out that we are continuing some investigations into those notary applications. We don't yet have concrete resolutions on them, but once we do, we'll be updating their GitHub applications, and we'll also update here. So just if you have been curious about what's happening with that, it's an ongoing process, and I don't have any like concrete details at this time. So in the works, stay tuned.
Nice. I can speak to the Phil Plus Day videos. So big thank you for those of you that came. Big thank you to you, Meg, for speaking at the event. So we have them all posted on YouTube, the links there. One of the reasons why I haven't blasted this out really wide is we're still in the process of having the videos added with subtitles in Mandarin. So just like the first Phil Plus Day that took place last year, when someone watches this, they can see the English spoken and the Mandarin translation. But if you were curious to get a jump on it, this is kind of like an early release. And then the purpose of those Phil Plus Day videos as we shot them was to kind of have this time capsule for someone joining the program or wanted more information. They can come and get a bite-sized bit of like whatever there are. So whether they want the legal considerations, the system overview, it's meant to be of like a welcome guide that we can point new applications, new notaries, new storage providers to learn more about that. So once that translation is complete, we'll blast that out so you all have copies. Or if you want to see that now, we have the link here in the deck for you. I also wanted to float a suggestion that we talked about last governance call. It had some more comments that took place in GitHub. So consider this just like the last check-in for feedback, because this impacts a lot of us that are on this call right now. So essentially what we're hearing is that the time zones that we have, the first governance meeting and the second, the first call takes place at around 2300, 11 p.m. for Beijing. And the second call that we're on now takes place at 7 in the morning, Beijing. Since a large number of our notaries are coming from that time zone, the feedback that we're getting is it's difficult to make these times work. The request was to adjust the call that we're on right now to be a little bit later. That way the folks can commute to the office and it's not just at that 7 o'clock morning rush. Now, for those of us in this North American time zone, what that would do is shift it from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., which is also not ideal if you have dinner to make or soccer practice to run to. So we're being very mindful of that. So I'm flagging this now for a chance for discussion. If you didn't want to add it to the GitHub repo, feel free to post in chat like, Kayray, I hate that idea, or yeah, that works. I'm really happy to hear about it. And I'm going to kind of mute and hear any thoughts you have, because what we're looking at doing is having a pilot test for the month of August, 2 things from now, try out this time and see if our attendance goes up or attendance goes down. And based off that, really get a sense of this is something that we should go with. So I'm going to pause, mute, and hear any thoughts you might have on this.
Seeing a couple of people in the chat. I think, yeah, one of the questions is just for those in attendance, switching this to 6 p.m. being out of the, 9 to 5 workday. If you're, here on the West Coast, is that still acceptable? And I think one of the questions, if it's not, is could you make the 8 a.m. in that case? Danny?
Yeah, I was going to ask if so the other notary meeting is at 8 a.m. on the West Coast, right? Okay, that's not going to change.
According to this proposal, that would not change. It would be 8 a.m. West Coast, 6 p.m. West Coast.
So who is the 8 a.m. one? That's sort of also trying to get Europe, right?
Yeah,
8
6
a.m.
p.m. is too late.
8 a.m. is getting Europe and East Coast, but it also has, and Kayray, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it has a pretty strong Chinese attendance because those people, they are coming at the end of their day. So it is late for them, but they are still attending that one.
Okay, it's not great for me, but I'll see. Like, we may want to think about just pushing the 8 a.m. one if it starts not supporting. Yeah, but it's not great, is it? Because that's really the end of the day for CET as well, and that's not even beginning to take into account the rest of Europe. Okay, I'm just going to accept that the West Coast of the United States is kind of it's kind of the worst place for time zones, but okay.
But we all live here.
Got it.
We
So
have great weather. That's what makes up for it, right? Terrible time zones with great weather.
if you're watching this just for time purposes, we have works for me, great in the chat. Meg, I think you get the best of both worlds. Meg, if we move this time 2 hours back for your time zone down and under, is that still okay for your workday?
Yeah, I think you guys say back, but you mean forward, like you're moving it 2 hours forward in the day, right? Yeah, yes. For once, it serves us.
All right. Then aside from anybody who might have it, I think we have overwhelming reception to this. I think we're going to stick with that August timeframe just to give people a chance to like adjust schedules, adjust calendars, and we'll just advertise this in the next 2 calls. That way we don't catch anybody off guard. But it sounds like we have consensus that this might work to increase. So we'll take a reading. I'll let you know how the attendance goes. I appreciate the feedback. With that, Galen.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll take on this one. Project Beacon. This is posted in the governance repo. I'm going to drop the link to it here. I encourage all the notaries and clients to go check it out. This is pretty similar to the proof of concept that the SEAL team has put forward in Antarctic. One of the major differences with this one so far is that the data set by law would need to remain in China. And so they have identified some Chinese storage providers that they would be working with. They've also already identified some notaries that they would be working with. There was some discussion this morning about wanting to see some increased notaries from different regions. And already since this morning, I think that there have been a few comments in this proposal by notaries saying that they would like to support from outside of that region. So that's already great. If you are also in that category, we'd love to get your buy-in there as well. So I think one of the questions here is just around, what can we further learn from doing these sort of out of band large data set proofs of concept? How much do we want to kind of devote time and resources to one-off cases like this? Do we feel that this is enough evidence that we should just change parts of the LDN process entirely for everyone? That sort of thing. So what I would love is to just open the floor here to see what the notaries in attendance have to say about this Project Beacon. And hopefully you have either had a chance to go look at it or this like summary is enough. It's education data is the data set. There's a question in the chat around the problem is still how to validate the data. And on this one, I think that the client is still open to KYC. It's the issue 538, Danny. The client is open to KYC. The data, to some extent, is encrypted. Is that the wrong one? Sorry, maybe I dropped the wrong link. I did. I gave the wrong link. It's a keyboard issue, clipboard issue. Hold on. Yes. To Greg's question. Yeah, 564. I don't know if Stephen or Gregory had more they wanted to weigh in on their questions here, or read it and drop questions in the proposal itself. Both are great.
Point is that I don't really know if we are ready for dealing with this kind of requests and whatnot, because we still have a lot to do on other fronts, and it's really hard if you think about it. We could be dealing with a lot of potential compliance issues and privacy issues that may come in the future and hit Filecoin, the whole Filecoin ecosystem really hard if anything like that happens. So I don't think we have the tooling. I don't think we have the capacity of like the humankind capacity of dealing with a lot of this.
Yeah, I think that from what I understand, the notaries themselves, some of them have also been doing site visits specifically with the clients. And I think that it goes a pretty long way when you have a notary local to your region who is on site working with you. Those are things that can be interesting and difficult to how do we put that kind of into GitHub, into a space to say this is the amount of KYC that we have done. But I think that's also what can be sort of tested with pilots like this, is to ask those notaries to prove out the authenticity of the client. So I think this is where the opportunity here is to say, like, what can we learn from doing tests like this?
Is that a priority for us right now? Because I don't really think it is. One of the things is that if you take a look at it, it is pretty similar to the proposal that Meg put in of dealing with enterprise clients and whatnot. So
I'd say that Meg's proposal is, how do we support projects like Project Beacon? Meg's proposal is like the superset where this is an example of exactly why there is interest in doing this, because like a project like this is a good like thing that may fall under the enterprise program.
Isn't so the proposal? Go ahead.
This is where if we have projects like Antarctic, Beacon, and these different proofs of concept, that the enterprise fill group can look to those as study cases to say, this is a situation where maybe we needed to ask more questions at this point in the phase, or maybe we could have captured this kind of evidence. And so we can do these as parallel learnings and not necessarily have to take a waterfall sort of dependency to say, well, we're not going to approve these other things. And to the point of like, is this a good type of project? If it successfully brings 60 PIBs of data and brings us learnings and brings a new kind of use case and pathway in this encrypted educational content, I think that this is something that I know Holon has talked about before, and we've heard from some other SPs that there are these regionally required encrypted data sets that need to be archived for long terms around things like education or health data, that could open up a very interesting product market fit for the Filecoin network. I see Deep has a hand, so I'm going to like punt it over to Deep.
Still muted. Thank you, Gillen. I think a couple of things I want to call out more like philosophically, and hopefully can help shape some of the approach here as well. Like, I think we are here to ensure that the Filecoin network is being used as well as possible. I think recently it has come to light that it is paramount that includes in its scope support for enterprise and private data in complex scenarios. That is literally why Meg has been working for several months to come up with a mechanism that would work. And then I see Sal here, and he's been doing a ton of work from the seal storage perspective to sort of push the boundaries of this program as well. And I think it's very important for us to take this approach of iteration, experimentation, and learning. It is unlikely that we will ever arrive at a point at which we will never want to change the process or continue extending and learning in the process. It is likely that we will arrive to a much better process very soon, especially with the work that the Enterprise Still Plus Working Group is doing. But it is unlikely that we're just going to see no applications coming in during now and the next like several months or whatever. Geopolitical environments are complicated. We're seeing regulation stepping up. I unfortunately sometimes, and this is an opinion, not a statement, but moving in the opposite direction when it comes to sharing, openness of economy and data. But that's part of what like Filecoin is about as well, is like building a storage layer that works for use cases, not just for very narrow niches. And Fil Plus should be prioritizing serving the needs of the many, given that that is what we're here to build. And so when entities that are coming up in countries like China and Australia have like specific data ordinances or laws, it's not about we can't do this, it's about what do we need to do this. And that's kind of the approach that I'd like for us to take. It might be that there are cases where it's like absolutely impossible and just so shady or so impossible for us to build like decentralized or distributed trust. And those cases, I think we should be calling it out. But when there's an option, I think we should be trying and learning from the option. Just for context, if this one went absolutely bad, like really, really, really bad, that's 60 petabytes of data cap. We'd probably catch it before it got to 60 petabytes, but even if we didn't, that's 600 petabytes. Quality adjusted power. That's still a blip, like in terms of the network trajectory and where we're headed. It's still a blip relative to the rest of the data cap that's been handed out today and the deals that are being made on chain. I'm talking like single digit percentages here. And so I tend to take the angle of like be a little bit more risk affinitized and experiment a little bit, mostly because we're just so early in our life cycle. And I really like that, Seal pushed us, and this is pushing us to think like, okay, like we're now reaching limitations where data can't move a geo. We still want to build trust outside that geo. What does it mean? Is it a video tour of a data center? Is it like a Zoom call with a set of notaries that like the client is introduced with a translation service and we're actually looking at the data that's being sealed? Is it tools that are being built to track CIDs across deals and networks so we can see the replication across each SP? We've done some of this stuff for Slingshot where we had to like trust clients to take on a role and then represent them in a data cap application. And so we built scaffolding for this stuff. We came to you as the notaries and offered you a path where you could independently audit how we were building replicas, how we were selecting SPs and KYC mechanisms that we were building on that front. And so I just view this as another step in the journey of like getting to a really large percent of the network being able to leverage Filecoin Plus in order to use Filecoin to deliver maximal value to society, to humanity, and to the world. And so let's continue to stretch ourselves and get these learning opportunities to structure the program in a way that's flexible to meeting clients where they're at today in their use of the network. And then let's iterate. Let's not just stop at building terrible, unscalable processes. And that's kind of where I'm hoping those of you that are passionate about this topic will pair with Meg and others in the community to make this better. End rant. Thank you. I see hands. Alex, Danny.
You want to go first?
Danny can go first. No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, up to you. I would sound like a stuck record, even saying I sound like a stuck record. But for me, the Filecoin Plus project is to narrowly to prevent self-dealing, prevent storage providers from creating deals that don't contain useful content just to get the rewards that come from that. With that in mind, sort of the only real kind of failure mode of something like this is some sort of arrangement going on between every single member of the parties to create a fake deal. To Alex's point, I mean, I'm not too worried about the. I don't think the liability is something that the system. I don't think this raises a particular challenge. There are questions about liability, but I don't see the Filecoin Plus project as a way of protecting people from liability or assuming liability on the part of the notaries or that system as a whole. So it's not a matter of checking the data. The question about whether it should, about public data versus encrypted data, is simply that we can look at public data and see whether it matches the claims of it being useful data. Whereas with encrypted data, it could just be noise, and that makes it more easy for someone to create a fake deal. I abstain from kind of deciding on this. Like, I just simply don't know. I wouldn't come in as a notary to sign off on it, but that's simply because I don't know any of the parties. I don't think that we should think of this particular risk that I've described as applying more just because everybody is in the same country or in the same region. I think that's an understandable concern, and I've seen it people viewed that way with SEAL and other kind of Western notaries cooperating. But the truth of it, the matter is that it's easier for notaries in a local region to check out the bona fides of storage providers and clients. My one question and thing that I would like just to throw into this is, it's very hard for me to calculate what the financial reward is of this much storage power. Like, I don't know what 600 pibs means for the storage providers who get that data cap. And I think that might put the issue in context, because I know that people are saying, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Like, the problem with being able to answer that question is it's an incredibly dynamic and complex, like, changing target. I think that Starboard has some ROI calculators in their dashboards, and you can see it. But part of the reason it's difficult to say, like, 600 pibs for this many months would equate to approximately this many block rewards is that you cannot calculate your relative power on the network because it is an unknown thing. So if you're like, yeah, I got 600 pibs, but then 3 days later, another set of storage providers locked up 1,200 pibs, like, your power proportionally is like, so that's where it's very difficult to, like, do those calculations. And since the time scale that we're looking at, we've seen, like, such changes in trajectory that I think that's where this issue of, like, well, on average 600 pibs means this is like, well, but that average is, like, so different from 6 months ago to now. So I think that you could do a quick calculation of, like, at a snapshot of today, what would 600 pibs mean? But again, that's, like, taking into account a more static network than we have. Deep, am I correct in that? Or did Deep have to drop?
No, I'm here.
Oh, you're here.
Yeah, I mean, measuring it with QAP though is really, really difficult. I think it's better to just stick to raw and then, like, work the math up from there. I think, Danny, like, the facts that you're setting are reasonable. I think it's just, it comes down to, like, can we come up with a better mechanism to test whether or not, like, encrypted data is real or not real? And there's some combination of, like, trust of the individuals and then the actual visibility into the data, or, like, tracking that data over a period of time.
Well, I think the thing that that's important to emphasize is access to the data, or data visibility, is something that gives us a clue into whether this is a legitimate deal or not. And I think sometimes we get into the weeds a bit about whether we're trying to exclusively support public data with the Filecoin Plus project. And for me, that's a useful side goal that I approve of, in that it's easier to get approval for data cap in those situations, but it's not the ultimate goal. So and the same goes for sort of creating a liability protection system where, because we know this is good data, storage providers can feel comfortable storing it. I don't think this program is in the job of doing either of those things. But anyway, okay, I'm done.
But I think to your last point is that about the not only yours, but not having a relation to the data and the like, not implying that the data that comes from this is, or from applications of encrypted data, are reliable and trusted and whatnot. That's part of our job as a governance team and as a governance body to analyze, and we are basically implying, and not just implying, but we are telling storage providers and the community that the data is verified, is trusted, is you can store it with confidence that you're doing a right thing, sort of. So yeah, to that point, I think we are involved in the process, and what if you think about not only the upsides but the downsides of being part of something like this at the stage we are in, I think is I don't think we are like necessarily ready.
If I can just answer that directly, I really strongly think that we're not. That isn't our role, and I think that for a number of reasons. One, I feel that, like, very specifically, the origin of the verified data program, the Filecoin Plus data, is not to verify the validity of the data for storage providers. It is to protect the ecosystem from self-dealing. And I kind of want to keep pushing that this is, I understand, like, thinking that is part of the role, and I don't think we do enough to make it clear that that's not part of the role. And that's for a number of reasons, right? One is, if we are in that role, the implication is that storage providers are in some way liable for the content that they store, particularly content that they store without a verified deal. And I think on behalf of storage providers, we really have to push back against that idea that intermediaries and storage intermediaries have some sort of strict liability for the content they store. That's not the case for centralized storage providers like Amazon, except in some extremely narrow cases. And so it's actually opening up storage providers for more liability if we imply that we are providing that service. Secondly, it opens up notaries and everybody involved in the governance system to another branch of liability, which is, yes, you're right. Like, what happens if someone stores a bunch of data that comes from a data cap provision and it turns out to include terrorist content, let's say, unlawful content of some kind. If there is a belief and a claim on the system that we are somehow the people who check this content to make sure it is in compliance with the laws of your country, that means that those storage providers can potentially argue that they should be able to turn around and sue the system as a whole and individual notaries in particular. And again, I don't think that is good for the system. It's not good for me personally, and it's probably not good for anybody on this call. And that's why I think it's really worthwhile emphasizing the very narrow job we have, which is to make sure that storage providers aren't making deals with themselves, fake deals, so that they can get extra returns for data that is fake, which is just noise or random numbers, or is never going to be used by anyone.
I think the fake deals part, Danny, is a bit of it's actually a symptom, or like managing, it's a risk mitigant to the actual goal. I don't think the actual goal is to minimize self-dealing. I think the actual goal is to maximize the usefulness of the network, which then people may find to have an abuse vector that you then want to mitigate as a risk. You would never have that as a goal, like naturally, without there being an incentive to do something in a particular way. And so the incentive here being, if you prove you've got something useful to share, we will give you a network back subsidy for it. Ergo, there is then the consequence of choosing to abuse the system because you can, and then us mitigating that risk by trying to minimize the abuse of that. And so I actually think the definition of like the notary role, I kind of disagree with a bit on the premise, where I think the job of a notary here is to identify how we can identify, like how should we figure out if a client coming to the network is actually trying to do something useful for the network. And so I think by design, that means getting really like asymptotically close to 100% of the traffic on the network going through the Filecoin Plus system. That was the philosophy behind the original design. We may choose to change that, or we might interpret that differently as a community, but that was the original intended goal. And that is the direction that at least I've been thinking about for a while and been trying to push for a while, because I think, like you said, it would be very difficult for us to reach a point where we certify everything and are willing to stake legally on it. And so instead, what we do is we try to identify processes to build a social trust that lets us say, yes, it's more likely than not that this client is here to use the network in the right way. And what that actually does for us is not necessarily protect downside, but I would say create upside. So instead of taking the pessimistic angle on this, I would instead say, look at all these awesome use cases we can unlock. How do we give clients leverage to make storage providers actually build a useful service by saying, okay, in order to serve these client needs, you need to have a high quality of service, you need certification, you need to scale up your operation, you need to deliver SLAs, etc. So what can we actually do to create additional leverage for clients, for storage providers to improve what they're offering in a decentralized storage today? And then 3, like what are we actually doing from a PR standpoint? Like, who are we able to serve? What are we able to do on this network? Like, why does it become a serious contender as a platform or protocol, or just a base infrastructure plumbing layer for the future? I think all of the things that you're saying flow naturally as consequences of abuse vectors to these problems, but they should be treated as such. Like, we should design mitigants to those risks, but every system has a tolerance for risk. Risk will never be 0. And so then it's like, how do we bring that number as low as possible? How do we bring tools and consequences to keep that abuse as minimal as possible? But at the same time, like, our job here is to enable clients and enable SPs to serve those clients as best as possible. There's also a 4th angle here, which is like the actual macroeconomic state of the network, where Filecoin Plus is actually one of the only ways today, with the way the economy is set up, for like SP operations to reliably have an incentive to stick around for the long term, to put it super bluntly. And it happens to be the best ROI on hardware today. And so the desire for somebody to abuse this is higher than it was ever before, right, given the state of the macroeconomy. But at the same time, the need to bring on data is also higher than it was ever before. And this being the only way, the only sustainable way in which that can happen. And so I would say our tolerance needs to go up, but then our decisiveness with abuse also needs to go up, rather than clamping down and slowing down. Like, this is not the right time to do that. But that is an opinion. And I would love to have additional discourse on that.
All right. Sorry, I got to jump in because we have other topics on this call. So as great as these conversations are, I would love to push the like tactical specific things around Project Beacon to the GitHub issue itself, and have these like ongoing things. If you think that there is something out of this that should be its own discussion topic, I encourage everyone on the call to like go open one of those discussion topics. But with the 14 minutes we have left, K-Ray, can you click us over to the next slide? Thank you. We heard from the group with Big Data Exchange earlier this morning. Deep, are you able to speak to this one?
Yeah, I'll make it real quick. Basically, there was some misconceptions around their actual like LDN application. And so CB had come to the conversation because he wanted to just have 30 seconds to highlight what the misconceptions were and correct a couple of assumptions, as well as update their LDN application. So a couple of notaries were concerned that an actual exchange is applying to be a client on its own exchange, And so the clarification points were, number one, yes, they are, but that's just like a test as opposed to like permanently being your client. And the intent behind the test is to generate like educational content that they can then use to bring on and support new clients that are coming through this pathway to be matched to SPs and make deals on the network. And then two, they are in the process, like if they end up profiting from this, which they likely will, given it's an auction-based system, they're planning to just like donate that to the original like source of the data, as opposed to like trying to make money off of like using their own platform and dogfooding. And then the second is effectively ensuring that they're continuing to bring on different types of use cases onto the network and like ensure that SPs at this early phase are there's momentum effectively for them to continue like using the platform, giving feedback and ensuring that they're improving it. So yeah, please feel free to check out the LDN application on Big Data Exchange. They're excited to onboard at least one data set in the near term to get these like insights and develop some educational onboarding documentation.
Yes, so I'm going to keep us moving quickly. I posted the link to that. It's issue number 391 in large data set repo. If you have questions for that team, you can go check that out. K-Ray, great, deep.
Yeah, quick one on this. Looking at exploring using a form instead of like a standard issue template. Like, so instead of people editing Markdown, they'd just be able to fill in a form. This should help with client UX. It should help with validation of info. It will result in more flexibility in applications that we create in the future. However, there's also flags that we're going to accrue technical debt here, where we need to invest a little bit more in fixing how we're scraping GitHub, and we may have to change some of the validation happening for data sources. So discussion will continue to evolve. Check out issue 565. We're going to do some investigation into how much of a pain this would be to implement on the software and the analysis side, and do some testing on the upside that we'd get from this for client UX. We had good discussion on this in the morning. If you're interested in hearing that, please watch the recording. If not, I'll see you in GitHub.
Yes, awesome. That is in the discussion topic as well, 565. And up next, I think we have Meg.
Hi. I don't want to repeat myself because I know that everyone is already quite aware of this proposal. So it's in the Slack channels, it's in the GitHub issue 559. Really just to call out around the team is assembling, we are kicking off. You have a narrow window to provide some feedback. A lot of people have been coming in with how will this work and what have you thought about that? And the answer to most of them is no, but please write it because we're going to go through all those discussions and whip them out so that they can be considerations, assumptions, or hypotheses. So please, this is your opportunity to provide some feedback. Danny, I want to connect with you on some of these like really important things that you were just raising. Ben, they're really key actually. And I had a suggestion, which I think the chat has moved on, but for that very large data set, do we want to reskin it so that it's smaller, and then we can use it as a use case in this enterprise program? It's something to think about. Like if it's causing friction, I'm reading the comments, I can see a fair amount of debate. If it's causing friction, we could just create a smaller LDN that runs, and it is private, but it has the notaries doing the intensive due diligence, and then the larger set we can talk about, but just bear in mind that won't be for a few months.
Yeah, you could always pitch that in that Project Beacon proposal and see. I think Eric has been taking the lead on communicating with that client, and I don't know the structure of the client's data. I know this was a similar question that was lobbed to the SEAL team with their project, and one of the issues was the size of data that the client was specifying, and so that led to some of that friction. And I don't have an answer to that for Project Beacon, but that could be a like easier path forward to say, let's do a smaller scope and continue this in as a test case in the enterprise.
It'd be a great test case actually, because it starts to expand on upper limits of thresholds. The page that K-Ray has put on the screen there for everyone, some of these are the high level, what we think will come out in the program. And it doesn't need to alarm anyone just yet. The only things that we needed decisions, I think summary level is, I've just lost my complete train of thought. The summary level is that between Kevin and I, when we have a look at the project plan, we're going to figure out what is the best comms cadence and vehicle for communicating some of these really important proposals. And this blue page that you're looking at, this is for the storage providers. So for full transparency, these are some of the big things that they're going to be considering. And on the previous page are the ones that will come to the governance community. To manage expectations, we'll have the bigger issues to deal with. And just like Danny was talking about, like keeping verifiability, trust, privacy, and transparency in balance is really hard. And so that's what we're going to try and work through.
Awesome.
Unless anyone has any other questions, that was all I was going to cover off just now.
Great. I don't see any hands. So just another chance here for that Airtable for our notaries for attendance. If you joined a little bit later, didn't get that in the messages. And then calling out that we have been testing getting the clients that are submitting LDNs to work on putting together those short presentations. We were seeing, like we talked about, we were seeing a lot of clients that wanted to come to these governance calls. And it took a lot of time to sort of try and get the tech, and they couldn't make both. And so we've been sort of testing this. So the sort of trade-off here is the notaries need to actually go check out these videos. So please go see those presentations and weigh in on those open LDNs. And like we said, there was a issue with the front end that has been resolved. So you should see all those LDNs when you sign in. So at that point, see a comment in the chat from Stephen. Good architecture is like 3 layers, clients on top, storage providers bottom, service layer in the middle. And this is kind of talking about some of the new project types that we're seeing, like BDE, estuary, and basically figuring out ways to keep that middle service provider layer auditable and independent. And so I think that's a very good point, something to hold on to and capture. Now, if there's nothing further, we could do 5 minutes for you to go check out this MyTrade video LDN 386 and jump into the front end app and sign some pending proposals. Greg has some questions. Great.
Some real quick questions, and maybe these are just more like placeholders to have future conversations, or maybe we can yes or no them. So the 5 petabyte ceiling for the LDNs, is that ever going to be increased, or is that going to stay at 5 petabytes for the foreseeable future?
I think that with LDN v3, it makes more sense now that we could remove that 5 petabyte ceiling, because those are coming from a separate entity. Part of that 5 petabytes was around management of all of these different notary multi-sites. So it may be time to propose changing that 5 petabyte ceiling to allow clients to say, what is the total amount for this project, counting replicas that you would expect across the lifetime.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you. And then question, like, so we're in the middle of Project Bearded and ceiling is going well. So there are 4 of us. What if one SP just falls off the face of the earth, and the 3 of us are kind of left sitting there? Has that happened, or what would be kind of the solution? Because now we're kind of halted.
My gut check is that the solution would be work to source another SP. I think that we are seeing some more SPs coming up in the community, but that wouldn't necessarily need to pause all of the other LDNs on things that are outside of the control. As far as like, has that happened? We have seen SPs go offline for a variety of reasons. And so, like, yes, SPs have gone offline. I don't know if that is directly the same thing, because they weren't necessarily as part of this proof of concept where it can impact other SPs or distribution. But yeah, we've seen SPs go offline. If that does happen, I think that as we have always asked for, it's transparency and how do we keep things moving forward and work to find another partner.
All right, cool. And then kind of based on that and the find another, thank you, Deep. So what's, and I know that we're working on the storage provider working group for this is like a kind of a place to find storage providers and even like a certification kind of, I know Stu was talking about ESPA providing some level of certification, but just that's definitely something that I know we're doing our best with, and it's not so easy just to swap SPs around. Right, especially once you kind of get the team working, I'm sure Sal could back me up on that. Get the team kind of working with the LVNs and things. So anyway, just like,
yeah. There's also
yeah.
Filecoin Reputation System is another tool where you can see stats on storage providers, and storage providers work to get themselves moved up in those rankings. And then we have on the Filecoin Plus front end, we also have a storage provider table where you can find contact info as well as, and it links to that field rep reputation score. So as far as like, where can I go to find other storage providers? Those are two things that are top of mind to me. We also have seen more and more Slack storage provider groups coming into, there's a deal market channel. And then I'm blanking on the other one, maybe Deep can remember it, where storage providers were doing more like AMAs and asking. It might have actually just been a general AMA channel that I'm thinking of.
Yeah, there was like a Phil deal market.
Yeah.
And then there's this as well for, I don't know if I'm more SP. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Kilogram. Yeah.
So I guess if we were to put ourselves somewhere, kind of put ourselves on all those and then also look in those places as well. Or is I guess that's the question, is where should we start using?
Yeah. I would say put yourself in field deal market, Greg, and then I think coming to this call, there's a recording button. A bunch of people are going to watch this and might reach out to you. So I would say, can you give us a call to action for somebody who's interested in reaching out to you to work with you? How should they get in touch with you?
Yeah, hit me on Slack, Gregory Sharfstein.
That's not a super easy name to spell.
Yeah, I know. It's blessing and a curse, right?
Yeah, no,
yeah. Well, but also if you join that deal market channel and post in there, and then people can find you in that channel and then DM you from there. I'm
putting it in chat too. That's how it's spelled. Go find him on Slack. He needs another SP partner. Go get him.
A bunch of them.
Bunch of them.
If you search for Greg and Seal from the name Seal Storage, you can find him. It's Greg Seal, and it will appear up in the list.
I don't see it when I do that. Actually, that's crazy. I wonder how it's different for you.
Yeah, different workspaces, at the top, maybe.
He's the only Gregory in Filecoin Slack, though, so that should be good enough.
All right, you heard it here, folks. Everybody go register your name, Gregory. You'll be getting a ton of DMs. Make sure you add all kinds of animal names to the end of it. We are at time, so with that, I'm gonna cut off the recording. And thanks everybody for their time this afternoon, evening, morning, middle of the night, whatnot. And we'll see you async and again in 2 weeks.